Hello friends, Paper Historian here. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, where we don't just tell stories, we drag you into the jungles, the mud, and the memories that history tries to forget. Tonight's tale begins not with glory, but with a draft notice. A letter that tells you your country needs you to fight a war you barely understand. They say it's for freedom, for independence, for democracy. They say it's a cause as clear as Normandy, as righteous as Iwo Jima. But when your boots hit the soil of Vietnam, you discover the truth. It is heat that suffocates, jungle that ambushes, traps that bleed, and enemies who vanish like smoke. You'll march with grunts, crawl with tunnel rats, sweat under helicopters, and carry home not medals, but ghosts. So settle in, because this is not the story they promised. It is the one you lived. You are not asked politely if you want to fight in a war. You are summoned, pulled in like a fish on a hook you never saw drop. The draft notice does not shout. It whispers with the authority of law. Its typewritten lines are plain, bureaucratic, almost gentle in their phrasing. But every young man who receives one knows what it means. Your country requests your service, and that request is an iron command. You are 19, maybe 20, still closer to your high school locker than to any idea of manhood, but suddenly you are told you're a soldier. It is dressed up as duty. Recruiters, politicians, and officers wrap the command in words meant to sound noble. They say this war is about freedom. They say it is about independence. They say it is about stopping communism before it spreads like a disease through Southeast Asia. They tell you about dominoes, how one country falls and then another, until the Pacific itself becomes a red tide crashing against California. They tell you that if Saigon falls, San Francisco will someday follow. They tell you this as if it were physics, as if geopolitics obeyed gravity. They never admit that the analogy was invented in a conference room, not on a battlefield. You hear about heroism. They talk about World War II, about Normandy and Iwo Jima, about how your fathers stormed beaches and liberated continents. They show you films of Marines in crisp uniforms marching down victory parades. They tell you Vietnam will be the same story, just in different colors. Jungle instead of beaches, helicopters instead of Higgins boats, the Viet Cong instead of Nazis. They assure you it will be swift, decisive, righteous. They never mention the mud, the leeches, the invisible enemy who knows the land better than you ever will. Training is the first stage of the illusion. You are shipped to a base where drill sergeants scream so loud their voices become background noise. You run until your legs ache, crawl under barbed wire, scrub rifles until your hands blister. They strip your individuality away. Your hair is shaved, your clothes replaced by fatigues, your civilian name swallowed under private. You learn to shout, "Yes, sir," with the conviction of a zealot. You march in rhythm until your body obeys commands before your mind thinks of them. You become part of a platoon, a body of bodies, interchangeable, replaceable. They tell you this is how you survive. Discipline, obedience, unity. You begin to believe it, because to resist is to be punished, and to obey is to be praised. And maybe because obedience gives you something to cling to in the face of dread. At night in the barracks, you write letters home that say, "It's tough, but I'm doing fine." You omit the part about the pit in your stomach that grows every time you remember the word Vietnam. Propaganda films fill the gaps between drills. Black and white reels show American soldiers walking through villages, children clinging to their legs, women waving in gratitude. Narrators explain in calm voices that you are building schools, digging wells, teaching democracy. They make it look like a missionary trip with rifles. You watch these films and try to believe them. You want to believe them, because not believing means admitting you are being sent into chaos for reasons no one has explained clearly. Your family believes. Your father shakes your hand, calling you brave. Your mother clings to you, whispering prayers. Neighbors slap your back and call you a hero before you have even touched a rifle in combat. The country needs you, they say. Do your duty. Make us proud. Their confidence wraps around you like armor, thin and fragile, but armor nonetheless. Among the boys in your platoon, bravado fills the air like cigarette smoke. One swears he'll be home in 6 months with a chest full of medals. Another jokes that the worst thing he'll catch in Vietnam is malaria. Everyone pretends not to be afraid, but you see it in the eyes that glance away too quickly, in the hands that fidget with cigarettes, in the forced laughter. Some hide their fear in silence, others in noise. You find your own way, writing home, polishing boots, staring at the ceiling until sleep drags you down. The slogans never stop. Officers explain that you are protecting democracy, that you are fighting for people who cannot fight for themselves, that the United States is the shield of the free world. They repeat it until it seeps into your bones. And maybe you believe it, or maybe you only pretend to, because pretending is easier than admitting. You have no idea why you are leaving home to fight in a jungle you cannot even picture on a map. The gear is heavy when they issue it. Rifle, helmet, flak jacket, boots. You put it on and feel taller, stronger, almost like the soldier they want you to be. But the weight is deceptive. The rifle will jam in the jungle, the boots will rot in the monsoon, the helmet will not stop shrapnel. Still, you stand straighter when you wear it. For now, it is easier to believe the gear will protect you than to face the truth that nothing protects you from war. Then the day comes. You board the plane. Its engines hum like a predator, too calm, too confident. You sit shoulder to shoulder with boys who still smell faintly of high school locker rooms. Some joke, some fall silent. You stare out the window as America shrinks beneath you, fields and highways turning into patchwork, then into clouds, then into nothing. You wonder how long before you see it again. You wonder if you ever will. And as the plane crosses the ocean, you carry with you a head full of slogans. Freedom, democracy, dominoes, duty. They roll around your skull like marbles, filling space where fear might otherwise settle. You cling to them because they are all you have. But slogans are not armor. They are not jungle. They are not bullets. They are the story told to you before the real story begins. The plane lands in Saigon with a shudder that rattles your teeth, and the first thing that hits you is not bullets or fanfare, but heat. Heat that feels alive, wrapping around you like a wet blanket, seeping into your lungs until every breath is work. It smells of jet fuel, sweat, and something else. Rot, maybe, or the jungle itself breathing against the city's edge. You thought you knew humidity back home, but Vietnam laughs at your memory of summers in Kansas or Georgia. This is a different planet. The airbase looks orderly at first. Rows of sandbags, jeeps rolling, helicopters buzzing like hornets too big for the sky. Men in fatigues hurry with rifles slung low, and for a moment you feel the story might be true. America in control, organized, determined. But the longer you stand, the more you notice the cracks. The faces are pale not from fear, but from exhaustion. The uniforms are stained, boots caked with mud. Everyone walks fast, but not with confidence. More like men rushing to avoid standing still too long. They herd you and the other fresh arrivals into trucks, canvas flaps down, and the city passes by in fragments. Children run barefoot in streets, some waving, some staring. Women carry baskets, men push carts, and everywhere you see eyes watching. Not grateful eyes, not friendly eyes, just eyes, measuring. You remember the propaganda films where villagers smiled and clapped for American soldiers? No one claps now. The truck jolts along rough roads, bouncing you until your helmet knocks against the frame. The landscape changes. Concrete becomes shacks. Shacks become jungle. The green is overwhelming, dense, dripping, endless. Vines strangle trees, palms crowd together, leaves glisten with heat. You realize quickly that this jungle is not background. It is enemy. Every shadow looks like it could hide a rifle. Every rustle sounds like footsteps. You grip your M16 harder as if plastic and steel can calm the nerves in your stomach. The base you reach is little more than a clearing ringed with barbed wire. Sandbags line bunkers, guard towers tilt slightly, helicopters roar in and out. Dust swirls whenever the rotors spin, coating your skin with grit that clings to sweat. You are shown a tent, your home. Cots, mosquito nets, the smell of mildew. Someone mutters about the rats, another about the mosquitoes. You pretend not to hear. Your first night is restless. The jungle screams with insects, frogs, unseen animals. Every crack of twig makes you tense. Flares light the sky, occasionally, casting the trees in ghostly white. Somewhere in the dark, you hear shots. A sergeant tells you to sleep, that it's just Charlie probing. You lie awake, gripping your rifle, waiting for a shadow to crawl through the wire. Morning brings heat again, heavier now. Sweat pours before breakfast. You line up for powdered eggs, stale bread, watery coffee. Flies swarm. The veterans eat quickly, barely speaking. They look older than they should, men in their 20s with eyes that carry decades. They glance at you and the other new arrivals, shake their heads slightly, like men watching recruits step onto thin ice. Then come the briefings. Officers talk about pacification, about winning hearts and minds, about search and destroy. The phrases sound polished, almost professional, but when you ask a corporal what it really means, he snorts. It means we go into a village, burn what looks suspicious, count bodies and come back. That's pacification. The words curdle in your stomach. Patrols begin. You march into the jungle in single file, rifles raised, eyes darting. The trail is narrow, the air thick. Sweat soaks your uniform, leeches crawl on your legs, mosquitoes pierce through fabric. The jungle closes in, pressing from all sides. You realize quickly that your training field back home was a child's playground compared to this. Here, the ground itself is enemy. You expect firefights, clear enemies, battles like the films. Instead, you find silence and sudden terror. Sometimes nothing happens for hours, just walking, sweating, swatting insects. Then, without warning, the world explodes. Shots crack from unseen positions, booby traps detonate, men fall screaming. You fire blindly into trees, convinced the leaves themselves are armed. Then it stops, as quickly as it began. Silence again, except for moans and orders shouted over radios. The enemy vanishes. You never saw them, but you felt them. That is the rhythm of Vietnam. Boredom stretched into eternity, cut suddenly by seconds of chaos. It wears at your nerves. You begin to flinch at every sound, twitch at every shadow. You realize the jungle is always watching, and you never see what watches back. Even villages are no comfort. You march through hamlets where huts sag under tin roofs, where children stare silently, where women glance away. You hand out candy, like the films told you, but sometimes children run. Sometimes they take it and look at you with blank eyes. You cannot tell who is friend, who is enemy, who will warn the Viet Cong of your patrol. The line between civilian and soldier blurs until you distrust everyone. Your illusions, still clinging when the plane landed, begin to rot like meat in the sun. This is not Normandy. This is not liberating Europe. This is walking through jungle that hates you, facing enemies you cannot see, protecting villagers who may be enemies themselves. This is heat, sweat, insects, fear. At night in the tent, you write letters home. You say you're fine, that you're adjusting, that the weather is tough but manageable. You do not mention the ambush, the traps, the screams. You fold the letter neatly, imagining your mother's smile when she reads it. You lie to protect her, the way the country lied to you, and so the first cracks widen. You came with slogans, but slogans melt in the heat. What remains is sweat, fear, and the knowledge that the story you were told does not match the story you now live. You learn quickly that war is not constant heroics or endless firefights. War, at least for the grunt in Vietnam, is routine. Endless, grinding, maddening routine, punctuated by flashes of chaos that remind you why the routine exists. You wake up sweating, you spend the day sweating, you go to bed sweating. If you stop sweating, it's because fever or dehydration is stalking you, and both can kill as surely as bullets. The day begins early, before the sun fully rises, because patrols move best in the half-light. Breakfast is powdered eggs, stale bread, bitter coffee if the supply lines haven't been cut. You eat fast, ignoring the flies, because there is no comfort in savouring. Meals are fuel, not enjoyment. A grunt who lingers over breakfast soon learns. His appetite isn't the most urgent part of the morning. After chow comes work, cleaning weapons, filling canteens, checking radios, tightening boots. You already know the ritual. If your rifle jams, you might die. If your boots fail, jungle rot will eat your feet. Discipline is less about salutes and more about survival. Drill sergeants back home screamed it into you, but the jungle whispers it more convincingly. Every mistake here leaves blood. Patrols dominate the rhythm. You march in single file through rice paddies, trails, elephant grass taller than your helmet. The air smells of mud, sweat, and smoke that never quite clears. Sometimes you walk for hours with nothing but insects screaming in your ears. The boredom is suffocating, but you cannot relax. Every step could trigger a mine. Every bush could conceal a rifle. Fear and monotony blur until your nerves are stretched like tripwires. You learn to watch the man in front of you more than the path itself. If he stumbles, you stumble after him. If he freezes, you freeze. The jungle is too thick to navigate alone, and your buddy becomes your compass, your shadow, your only reassurance that you are not walking into oblivion. Camaraderie forms not from speeches, but from necessity. You trust the man next to you because not trusting him is suicide. Then comes camp life, when patrols end and the day folds into night. You sit under ponchos strung between trees, chain-smoking cigarettes handed out in rations, sipping lukewarm coffee or beer when the supply is generous. You joke because silence is heavier than heat. The jokes are crude, sometimes cruel, but they keep the dark at bay. You learn to laugh at the worst things, about home, about death, about officers who don't understand. Humour is armour, thin but vital. Letters from home arrive sporadically. They smell faintly of paper and safety, worlds away. Your mother writes about the garden, your girlfriend about dances you're missing, your friends about jobs and cars. Their lives continue as if yours were just paused, not shattered. You write back carefully, trimming truth into shapes they can bear. I'm fine. I'm safe. The weather's rough, but I'm holding up. You never mentioned the ambush last week, the kid who lost a leg to a mine, the way you vomited after seeing a body mangled by a trap. You tell them you'll be home soon, though you don't know what soon means anymore. Supplies define the quality of days. If ammo and rations arrive, you breathe easier. If they don't, resentment festers. Helicopters bring crates, medics, sometimes hot meals, but helicopters also bring noise that screams your presence to the jungle. The Viet Cong listen as well as you do, and they know when the sky delivers. Boredom is the hidden enemy. You sit for hours in foxholes staring at green walls of trees. You clean your rifle again. You scratch mosquito bites until they bleed. You count cigarettes. You carve initials into helmets. You stare at the sky until it blurs. You wait for something to happen, and the waiting corrodes your nerves more than combat, because you know combat will come, you just don't know when. Fear becomes part of your body. At night, every sound is enemy. The snap of a twig, the buzz of an insect, the sigh of wind through palm fronds, all sound like death approaching. You grip your rifle until your hands ache. Flares hiss overhead, casting shadows that twitch like ghosts. Sleep is shallow, fragile, always on the edge of waking with a start. Friendship keeps you human. You share cigarettes, stories, pictures from home. You learn the accents of men from Texas, New York, Iowa, California. You discover who snores, who hums under his breath, who cracks jokes even after firefights. You bond with them more than with your family, because these are the men who crouch beside you in ambushes, who drag you if you're hit, who will whisper last words if it comes to that. Officers talk about body counts and kill ratios. You talk about making it through the week. The official war is fought on maps, in conferences, with numbers and strategies. Your war is fought one step at a time, one breath at a time, in mud and sweat. You stop caring about speeches. You care only about surviving patrols and keeping your buddy alive. Daily life reduces itself to essentials: eat, march, sweat, shoot, sleep. Repeat until the days blur into each other. Weeks feel like years, months like lifetimes. You forget what fresh clothes smell like, what quiet sounds like, what safety feels like. You forget why you came. You remember only where you are, the jungle, the heat, the waiting. And slowly, the illusions you carried here about freedom, democracy, dominoes, fade. What remains is the grunt's truth. War is endurance, survival, camaraderie, and fear. Every day lived is victory. Every day survived is enough. You were told you'd be fighting an army, but armies stand and fight. They wear uniforms, they march in lines, they hold ground. The Viet Cong are something else entirely. They do not fight the war you trained for. They fight the war they've lived their whole lives. Patient, silent, merciless. They are shadows with rifles, farmers by day and soldiers by night, men and women both, young and old. You never see them until they have already fired, never hear them until it's too late. The first tactic you learn about is the ambush. It is the heartbeat of guerrilla war. You march in column along a jungle trail, sweating, rifles loose in your hands, and suddenly the air shatters. Gunfire from both sides, from above, from nowhere. Claymores you didn't plant detonate. RPGs streak through trees. Your instinct is to fire back, but at what? The jungle looks empty, even as it kills you. Seconds feel like hours. Then the firing stops. Silence returns. You count bodies, drag wounded, fire into bushes, but the enemy is gone. Melted, evaporated. The jungle has swallowed them again. The second lesson is the traps. The Viet Cong turn the earth itself into a weapon. Punji pits, sharpened bamboo stakes hidden under leaves, wait for boots. Step wrong, and the stake pierces flesh, sometimes smeared with excrement to infect the wound. Tripwires trigger grenades or rockets, hidden in branches, in cans, in toys left on trails. Doors of huts swing open with crossbows rigged inside. Even helmets abandoned on trails may be traps, bait for curiosity that explodes when lifted. Every step, every touch, every movement is suspicion. You become paranoid. You tap the ground with bayonets before stepping. You scan every tree for wires. You stop trusting villagers because farmers can bury mines in paths with the same hands they use to plant rice. The enemy's best tactic is not killing, but eroding. Every trap costs you trust. Every ambush drains morale. You begin to believe the jungle itself has turned against you. Then you learn about the tunnels. The Viet Cong live not only in the jungle, but beneath it. Networks run for miles under villages, jungles, even American bases. They eat, sleep, hide, move underground. They pop up through camouflaged holes, fire, vanish again. You hear stories of entire battalions disappearing into the earth and reappearing behind American lines. The tunnels are dark, narrow, suffocating. Too small for most American soldiers. So, volunteers crawl in. Tunnel rats, skinny men armed with pistols, flashlights, and nerves of steel. They wriggle into blackness, hearing rats scuttle, feeling air grow foul. At any moment, they may face a booby trap, a Viet Cong with a knife, a dead end that suffocates. You watch them go in, you watch them come out pale and shaking, and you thank God you weren't chosen. The war beneath the earth is worse than the war above it. The Viet Cong also used the simplest tactic of all, blending. You patrol through a village and see women carrying baskets, children playing, men in fields. Then, at night, those same villagers put on black pajamas, pick up rifles, and ambush you. A farmer in the morning is a soldier at dusk. You never know who is who. Trust rots. Eventually, you trust no one. You look at every child as possible decoy, every woman as potential scout, every old man as informant. The enemy has turned civilians into camouflage, and you begin to see civilians less as people and more as terrain, dangerous, unpredictable terrain. The Viet Cong fight with patience. They do not need to win battles, they need only to bleed you. They measure success not in land gained, but in American lives lost, in morale drained, in headlines back home that scream about casualties. They do not need to defeat you, they need to make you want to leave. Every ambush, every trap, every mine is a whisper. You don't belong here. And the jungle helps them. They know its paths, its rivers, its seasons. They move silently where you stumble. They fire and vanish while you sweat and curse. You feel heavy in their world, clumsy, blind. They are ghosts who own the terrain. You start to adapt, but adapting is never enough. You walk slower, scout more carefully, carry more explosives to clear trails. But paranoia cannot erase inevitability. You know that eventually someone in your squad will step wrong, someone will trigger a trap, someone will not return. And you know that it could be you. At night you talk about it with the others, voices low. Some say the Viet Cong are devils, inhuman. Others say they're just men who know their land better than you ever will. A few say it doesn't matter, because whether devils or men, they are winning in ways that medals and body counts can't measure. You came expecting to fight soldiers. Instead, you fight shadows, traps, tunnels, whispers. You fight paranoia, you fight exhaustion. And the worst part, you fight doubt, because deep down you know they are fighting for their land, and you are fighting because a draft notice told you to. The Viet Cong do not just kill men, they kill illusions. Every ambush, every tunnel, every trap shreds another piece of the story you were told before the plane landed. You came to fight for freedom. Now you fight to make it through patrol. You came to liberate villages. Now you burn them because you cannot tell who is enemy. You came to win a war. Now you only try not to lose yourself in the jungle. You are told America is the most powerful military force on Earth, and in some ways, it's true. You see the machinery the first week you're in country. Helicopters swarming like mechanical hornets, trucks loaded with artillery shells, jets screaming overhead. It is overwhelming, industrial, loud. The Viet Cong hide in shadows. America answers with spectacle. Yet you learn quickly that power doesn't always mean control, and noise doesn't always mean victory. The helicopter is king of this war. Hueys thump overhead constantly, carrying men, supplies, firepower. They are taxis, ambulances, gun platforms. You ride them into jungles, skid plates brushing treetops, pilots weaving through clouds of smoke and tracer fire. Doors are open, M60 mounted, gunners spraying at anything that looks suspicious. The wind blasts your face, your helmet rattles, and for a moment you feel invincible. But as soon as boots hit mud, you are back in the same nightmare. Sweat, insects, paranoia. The helicopter can drop you anywhere, but it cannot hold anything. You realize you are tourists of combat, flown in and flown out, measuring success in miles traveled instead of ground secured. Artillery follows you everywhere. Bases are ringed with howitzers, firing night and day. If a patrol makes contact, coordinates are radioed, and shells scream overhead to pound the jungle. Trees splinter, ground shakes, and you swear no living thing could survive. But when you move in after the barrage, you find trails already cleared, blood trails vanishing into undergrowth, sometimes no sign of the enemy at all. Artillery kills, yes, but it rarely decides. It pounds the jungle more than it pounds the Viet Cong. Napalm becomes infamous even before you smell it. Pilots drop canisters that burst into fire, flames crawling across ground and clinging to anything unlucky enough to touch. You watch from a distance as jungles ignite, as villages disappear in firestorms. The heat roars, the smoke chokes, and sometimes the wind carries it back toward your lines. You are told napalm clears cover, destroys tunnels, terrifies the enemy. Maybe it does, but you also see children burned, huts flattened, survivors screaming. You wonder if the hearts and minds you're supposed to win can survive this kind of fire. Defoliants like Agent Orange are sprayed to strip jungle of its camouflage. Helicopters fly low, mist trailing, leaves shrivel, fields die. For a time, it feels like control, making the jungle transparent, but the jungle grows back and the poison remains. You breathe it, you touch it, you carry it home in your blood. No officer mentions that in briefings. Search and destroy missions define your life. Squads are flown into suspected Viet Cong areas, told to find, fix, and finish. The orders sound simple. The reality is days of walking, sweating, searching huts, burning supplies, interrogating villagers, sometimes finding weapons, sometimes nothing at all. You measure success in body counts, numbers written on reports, tallies meant to prove progress. Officers demand them, soldiers resent them. You know numbers can be inflated, mistakes counted, civilians swept into statistics. Body counts rise, but victory does not come. Villages become battlefields of suspicion. You are told to separate enemy from civilian, but how? A farmer's field hides mines. A woman's basket hides ammunition. A boy's eyes watch too closely. You burn huts, uproot crops, relocate families into strategic hamlets. You call it pacification. Villagers call it destruction. You begin to see the war less as liberation and more as occupation, though you do not say it aloud. Air power is relentless. B-52s drop bombs that flatten forests, craters yawning where trees once stood. You watch from the ground, feeling the earth shake as tons of explosives erase entire square miles. It looks devastating, godlike. But after the smoke clears, the enemy remains. They emerge from tunnels, from villages untouched at the edges, from jungles that somehow still stand. You realize America is fighting with hammers in a war that demands needles. Your squad talks about it constantly. Some believe the firepower is unstoppable, that eventually the Viet Cong will break. Others mutter that no amount of bombs can kill an idea and that the enemy fights for something you can't bomb out of them. You stay silent, but you know which side of the argument feels heavier. Every tactic you use seems designed for a different war. You were trained to fight battles, to seize objectives, to hold ground. Here, you seize nothing, hold nothing. You march, you burn, you kill, you leave. The jungle reclaims it all the next day. Villages rebuild, tunnels reopen, the Viet Cong return. You wonder if the war is less about winning and more about surviving long enough to leave. Helicopters, artillery, napalm, defoliants, bombs. America throws everything at Vietnam. But for every tree burned, another stands. For every tunnel destroyed, another is dug. For every village pacified, another turns hostile. The war you fight feels less like victory and more like erosion, slow and inevitable. And through it all, you remain the grunt at the bottom. Officers plan missions, politicians count numbers, generals brief maps. You sweat, march, shoot, and try to survive. You fight with weapons powerful enough to erase villages, yet you never feel powerful. You carry fire into the jungle, yet the jungle never burns away. In the end, the tactics are loud, terrifying, destructive. But the enemy is quiet, patient, and everywhere. And you begin to suspect, deep down, that the jungle prefers their way. At first you think the war is outside, in the jungle, in the tunnels, in the villages. But as weeks turn into months, you realize the war is moving inward. It crawls under your skin, seeps into your lungs with the damp, coils in your gut with the fear. The jungle is dangerous, yes, but the battlefield you cannot escape is the one inside your own head. Paranoia sets in slowly. You stop trusting shadows, then people, then even your own instincts. You see a boy smiling in a village and wonder if he carries grenades. You see a farmer in a field and imagine he planted mines. You hear laughter and think it's bait. You cannot relax because every time you do, someone dies. The Viet Cong know this. They don't just ambush bodies, they ambush minds. They make you jump at every twig, sweat at every silence, distrust every gesture. Soon, you feel you are fighting not just them, but your own nerves. Sleep is fragile, shattered by flares, by gunfire, by dreams. Nightmares repeat, ambushes, explosions, screams. You wake soaked in sweat, heart racing, rifle clutched, unsure if you are still dreaming. Sometimes you stay awake, chain smoking until dawn, too afraid to close your eyes. Exhaustion becomes normal. Your body moves on autopilot, your mind half absent, your nerves fraying. Fear becomes habit. You fear not just death, but survival. Because survival means another day of the same. The heat, the boredom, the sudden chaos. You wonder which is worse, the firefight that might kill you, or the endless waiting that might unhinge you. Both wear at you until you cannot tell which part of you is still sane. Drugs appear, first in whispers, then in plain sight. Marijuana drifts through tents, a haze heavier than the jungle's air. Pills are passed, heroin cooked in soda cans, morphine stolen from medics. You see men who cannot sleep without smoking, who cannot patrol without pills. Some use to numb fear, others to fight boredom, others just to forget. Officers frown, but supply lines are leaky. Black markets thrive, and the war itself seems to encourage escape. You try it once, maybe twice, telling yourself it helps. Then you realize half your squad is high half the time, and nobody cares anymore. Discipline phrase. Orders feel meaningless. You hear talk of fragging, soldiers turning grenades on their own officers. At first, you think it's rumor, but then you hear the stories. A lieutenant, too eager for glory, too careless with lives, found dead in his tent after a grenade accident. Everyone shrugs. No one investigates too deeply. In a war where officers count body numbers instead of lives, loyalty dissolves. Fragging becomes whispered justice, proof that fear flows both ways. Letters from home twist the knife. Families write about weddings, jobs, cars, new babies. The world keeps spinning without you. You are stuck in jungle that never changes, fighting an enemy that never shows its face. You fold the letters, read them until the paper softens, then tuck them away like talismans. They remind you of what you've lost. Not just safety, but normal life itself. Sometimes you wonder if you'll even know how to live it again. Disillusion creeps in. You came here with slogans about democracy, independence, freedom. Now you burn villages, destroy crops, count bodies like statistics. You see children burned by napalm, villagers herded into camps, forests stripped bare by chemicals. You hear officers call it progress. You stop believing. You realize you are not liberating anyone. You are surviving one day at a time in a war that makes less sense the longer you fight it. Morale collapses in waves. Some men go quiet, retreat into silence. Others grow reckless, charging into firefights as if daring bullets. Some joke too much, laugh at everything, because laughing is easier than screaming. You find yourself in the middle, trying to hold on to routine, cleaning your rifle, writing letters, counting days. But the days blur, and you stop knowing how many are left. You start noticing how different you feel. You flinch at sudden noises, even back at base. You keep your rifle close, even when you should feel safe. You scan tree lines instinctively, even when there are no trees. The war rewires you. Your body lives in fight or flight, never resting. You are a machine of nerves, always waiting for the next explosion. Then comes the worst realization. The war doesn't end when the firefight does. It doesn't end when the patrol returns, or when the letters come, or when the officer says you've done your duty. It doesn't end when the napalm burns, or when the tunnels collapse, or when the helicopters roar. The war is permanent now because it has moved inside you. You look at your reflection in a canteen and barely recognize yourself. The boy who boarded the plane with slogans is gone. The man staring back is older, harder, emptier. You wonder what will be left if you ever go home. Will the paranoia fade? Will the nightmares stop? Will normal life feel real again? You don't know. Nobody knows. What you do know is that Vietnam has already won something. Even if America wins every battle, even if villages are pacified, even if the maps look favorable, Vietnam has carved itself into your bones. The jungle has made itself permanent in your nerves. The enemy has built tunnels in your head. And there is no airstrike powerful enough to bomb them out. The day finally comes when your tour ends. You count down the days for weeks, scratching numbers into helmets, into walls, into your own memory. Then the helicopter lifts you out of the jungle for the last time. You breathe air that isn't thick with gunpowder or rot, but it doesn't feel real. Planes roar you back across the ocean, across time zones, across everything you have lost. When the wheels touch American soil, you expect relief. What you feel instead is confusion. The war clings to you like the smell of smoke in your fatigues. You step off the plane in uniform, boots still crusted with red mud, and you expect cheers. You remember films of World War II, parades with flags waving, crowds kissing soldiers in the streets. Instead, you hear silence. Sometimes worse than silence. Protesters line fences with signs. Baby killers, get out of Vietnam, end the war. They don't see a soldier, they see the war itself, embodied in you. You walk past their shouts with your jaw tight, unsure if you are supposed to feel proud or ashamed. Family greets you with tears, but even their smiles falter. They don't know what to ask. They say, "Welcome home, son. We're proud of you." But their eyes dart when you go quiet too long, when you flinch at sudden noises, when you stare out windows too long. They want the boy who left. You've returned a stranger. Normal life feels unreal. Streets are too clean, houses too quiet, people too casual. You see men your age in college, laughing on campuses, their protests echoing through halls. They call you murderer, occupier, pawn. You want to tell them what it was really like. The sweat, the fear, the boredom, the paranoia. But you know they wouldn't understand. They don't want truth. They want slogans as polished as the ones that sent you. Jobs are hard to find. Employers hesitate to hire men with 1,000-yard stares. You drift between work, factories, construction, bars, never staying long. Nights are worse. Sleep refuses to come. Or, when it does, it drags you back into jungle. Gunfire cracks in dreams, sweat soaks your sheets, screams echo from foxholes that no longer exist. You wake with heart racing, rifle not in reach, but hand still clutching. Some soldiers bury themselves in silence, never speaking of it. Others drown in alcohol, in drugs, in the same haze that numbed them overseas. A few find themselves in bars full of veterans, swapping stories too sharp for outsiders. Camaraderie survives there, fragile but real. You laugh again, but it is laughter with edges, laughter that hides ghosts. The country moves on faster than you can. News anchors talk about peace talks, withdrawals, politics. For them, the war is numbers, headlines, votes. For you, it is faces, friends who didn't come back, names etched into memory harder than stone. You watch politicians argue about strategies that mean nothing to you. They were never in the jungle. They never smelled napalm. They never crawled into tunnels. They never saw a buddy blown apart by a mine. Yet they speak as if they know. You grind your teeth and turn off the television. Some find purpose in protests. Veterans against the war, marching in fatigues, demanding honesty. Others retreat further into anger, furious at a country that asked for blood and then spat on it. You hover between, unsure which wound cuts deeper, fighting a war that made no sense, or coming home to a country that made you feel guilty for surviving it. You carry the jungle with you everywhere. Crowds feel like ambushes, fireworks feel like artillery, trails in forests feel like patrol routes. Even silence feels suspicious. You realize Vietnam has trained you too well to ever leave it. You live in America now, but your nerves live in rice paddies. And yet, slowly, memory hardens into legacy. Years later, a wall rises in Washington, black granite carved with names. You run your fingers across it, tracing letters that you once shouted in foxholes. You see tourists leave flowers, medals, notes. You see veterans stand silent, some crying, some saluting. For once, there are no protesters. For once, silence feels like respect. But even the wall cannot erase the truth you carry, that Vietnam was not the war they told you it would be. You were told it was about freedom, about democracy, about dominoes. In reality, it was about survival. You fought shadows with firepower, villages with napalm, jungles with helicopters. You killed without seeing faces, lost friends without seeing enemies, came home without finding peace. The war defines you long after the jungle is gone. It shapes how you trust, how you sleep, how you see your country. It marks your body with scars, your mind with tunnels. You are not who you were when the draft notice arrived. That boy died somewhere in the heat, in the mud, in the fear. You are what remains. A soldier who survived Vietnam, not because of slogans, but in spite of them. Settle in for our next story, where we explore the life of Nicolaus Copernicus. Nicolaus Copernicus is born in 1473 in the city of Torun, a trading town on the Vistula River, where merchants haggle, ships dock, and the sky stretches wide over red roofs. He is the fourth child of a respectable merchant family, not poor, not noble, firmly in the middle ground, where survival is steady and ambition is still possible. His father trades copper, his mother tends the household, and young Nicholas grows up in a world where commerce keeps bread on the table, but where stars already whisper of something beyond. Childhood in Torun is not about telescopes or theories. It is about markets, guilds, and the rhythm of church bells. But even here, the boy notices the sky. Winters are long, nights are clear, and constellations blaze over the river. Most children see hunters, bears, saints in those patterns. Nicolaus stares longer. He asks questions that adults wave away. Why do stars move together? Why does the moon change shape? Why does the sun seem to slide across the heavens each day? Curiosity is his first inheritance, more valuable than copper. When Nicholas is 10, his father dies. Loss presses early. His uncle, Lucas Vatsenrode, steps in. Lucas is not just any relative, he is a canon of the church, ambitious, clever, eventually to become Bishop of Warmia. He sees in Nicholas not just another mouth to feed, but a potential cleric, a mind to shape, a tool for the church's future. It is thanks to Lucas that Nicholas's path leads away from merchant stalls and toward universities. Without him, Copernicus might have spent his life weighing copper instead of the cosmos. Schooling begins in Torun, then continues in Chelmno, where the boy learns Latin, the language of scholarship and power. He memorizes grammar, stumbles through rhetoric, absorbs the basics of logic and philosophy. The church requires Latin. The stars will one day require it too, because to challenge the universe, one must first write in the language of authority. By the time he is a teenager, Copernicus is already armed with the linguistic keys to the intellectual world.
In 1491, at 18, he enrolls at the University of Krakow. It is here, among cobbled streets and lecture halls, that his curiosity sharpens into study. Krakow is alive with scholarship, mathematicians teaching geometry, astronomers charting heavens, philosophers debating Aristotle. Nicolaus sits in halls where instruments are passed around, astrolabes, quadrants, celestial spheres. He learns how to measure angles, how to predict eclipses, how to calculate planetary positions. He does not yet dream of overturning the universe, but the seeds are sown.
What defines these years is exposure, not yet rebellion. Copernicus learns Ptolemaic astronomy, the Earth at the centre, planets circling in deferents and epicycles, a complex but authoritative model. He accepts it because all accept it. But perhaps, even as a student, he feels a twitch of doubt when epicycles multiply, when explanations grow too heavy, when the math seems forced. He is not ready to question, but he is learning where questions might live. He is also learning the Church's shadow. Every lecture, every book, every chart rests on the foundation of theology. The heavens are not just physical, they are divine, ordered by God, proof of creation. To challenge the model is to challenge not just scholars, but priests. Young Nicolaus notes this too, storing the danger alongside the curiosity. By the time he leaves Krakow, Copernicus has no degree. Universities then do not hand them out like parchment favours. But he has something more important: knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, and, perhaps most importantly, a taste of the questions that will gnaw at him for the rest of his life. From Turin to Krakow, from merchant son to student of the heavens, Copernicus is already walking a path that will lead him to a quiet revolution. For now, he is still just a boy who stares at stars too long, but history already leans toward him, waiting for the moment when doubt will become theory and theory will become heresy. In 1496, Nicolaus Copernicus leaves Poland and heads south, across mountains and rivers, into Italy. He is 23, carrying with him letters of recommendation, the ambitions of his uncle Bishop Lucas Watzenrode, and the quiet curiosity that has never left his gaze. His destination: Bologna, one of the intellectual capitals of Europe. His uncle wants him to study law and prepare for a career in the church. Copernicus agrees, outwardly obedient. But beneath the robes and books of canon law, he smuggles another companion: astronomy. Bologna is a city of scholars and contradictions. Streets echo with chants of students, taverns roar at night, yet lecture halls demand silence broken only by the scratch of quills. Copernicus enrolls in law, a subject thick with decrees, commentaries, and endless Latin sentences. But he also seeks out astronomers. He befriends Domenico Maria Novara, a professor of mathematics and astronomy, known for his sharp tongue and sharper doubts about Ptolemaic orthodoxy. With Novara, Copernicus finds a kindred spirit, someone willing to question epicycles and deference, someone who mutters that maybe the math is not as perfect as Aristotle claimed. It is with Novara that Copernicus participates in his first recorded observation. On March 9th, 1497, they measure the position of the moon against a star. It seems minor, an academic exercise, but for Copernicus it is a moment of revelation. He is not merely learning from books anymore. He is testing the heavens himself. The sky begins to answer his curiosity, not through authority, but through observation. Law continues, of course. His uncle expects diligence, and Copernicus provides it. He memorizes legal codes, debates ecclesiastical statutes, cites in endless lectures. He proves capable, intelligent, promising. Yet he never gives law his full heart. In the margins of his notes, stars seem to hover. After Bologna, he travels further south. He studies medicine at Padua, another concession to practicality. Medicine will be useful for a churchman, a way to treat the sick in his chapter, to provide charity that flatters donors. Copernicus attends dissections, learns the humours, hears Galen quoted like scripture. He learns to prescribe herbs, to bleed patients, to balance hot and cold, moist and dry. But again, astronomy hovers nearby. The heavens, after all, are thought to influence health through astrology, and Copernicus listens carefully when physicians calculate horoscopes. The stars never release him. In 1500, he travels to Rome itself, the beating heart of Christendom. He stays for a year, studying canon law, observing the machinery of the church in all its splendor and corruption. He lectures in mathematics, impressing scholars with his grasp of geometry and astronomy. Imagine the scene: a young Polish cleric speaking in Latin to an audience of Roman academics, pointing at celestial diagrams, explaining motions of planets with clarity beyond his years. He is no longer merely a student, he is becoming a teacher. Yet he is still cautious. He does not proclaim radical theories. He does not shout that the earth moves or the sun stands still. He studies, he observes, he teaches, but he does not yet rebel. Copernicus is not Giordano Bruno, ready to burn with defiance. He is a quieter figure, one who doubts inwardly and builds carefully. His rebellion will take decades, born not of fire, but of patience. After Rome, he returns north briefly, then south again, continuing studies at Padua until 1503. He never takes a degree in medicine, but he learns enough to practice it competently for the rest of his life. Finally, he earns a doctorate in canon law at Ferrara, fulfilling at least part of his uncle's wishes. With law behind him, with medicine in his toolkit, with astronomy glowing steadily in his mind, he is ready to return home. These years in Italy shape him in ways no single observation could. He absorbs humanist culture, sees the revival of Greek and Roman texts, reads translations that breathe new life into Plato and Archimedes. He hears debates about Aristotle, some reverent, some scathing. He sees art in Florence, architecture in Rome, libraries filled with manuscripts. He breathes Renaissance air, and it changes him. Italy also shows him contradiction, the grandeur of the church side by side with its corruption, the brilliance of scholarship tangled with politics. He learns that authority is fragile, that even sacred truths wobble when tested. Perhaps this is why he begins to imagine that even the earth itself might wobble in its presumed throne at the center of the cosmos. By the time he returns to Poland in 1503, Copernicus is 30, no longer just a merchant's son or a student. He is a canon lawyer, a physician, a scholar, and, quietly, an astronomer. His uncle appoints him a canon at Frombork Cathedral, securing his income and position. The church expects him to serve in administration, to oversee lands, to counsel the chapter. Copernicus nods, accepts, bows to duty. But behind the safety of cathedral walls, he carries Italy with him. The observations, the doubts, the humanist spirit, the conviction that the heavens might hold secrets the ancients never solved. Thus begins the next chapter of his life. Copernicus the canon, outwardly dutiful, inwardly restless. He will manage estates, treat patients, administer law, but when night falls, he will climb towers, peer at the sky, and wonder if perhaps everything is wrong. In 1503, Nicolaus Copernicus returns north, degree in canon law secured, medicine half learned, reputation polished by Italian air. He is 30 now, no longer a youth staring wide-eyed at professors. He is a canon of the Warmia chapter, thanks to his uncle Bishop Watzenrode. That title does not mean monk. It means administrator, manager, servant of the cathedral's wealth. Frombork, his assigned post, sits on the Baltic coast, a fortress-like cathedral complex overlooking the sea, surrounded by forests, wind, and silence. On paper, his life is secure. A canon receives income from cathedral estates, collects rents, adjudicates disputes, oversees building repairs, signs off on accounts. He is a respectable cleric, supported for life, provided he fulfills obligations. For many men, this would be enough. Stability, prestige, a comfortable place in society. But Copernicus, polite and diligent though he is, finds the daily grind unsatisfying. Counting grain sacks is not the same as counting stars. Still, he does his duty. He attends chapter meetings, wears robes, signs documents. He administers estates, deals with peasants, collects taxes. He treats the sick when needed, applying his Italian medical training with leeches and herbs, prescribing rest when he knows it will not cure. He writes letters for his uncle, advises on politics when asked. Outwardly, he is the model canon, steady, educated, reliable. But inwardly, he lives another life. Frombork may be remote, but it has towers. From those towers, the night sky spreads vast and clear. Unlike Italy's crowded cities, Frombork offers darkness, silence, and horizons. Copernicus sets up instruments, quadrants, astrolabes, sighting tubes. He measures the rising and setting of planets, the angles of stars, the drifting of the moon. Slowly, over years, he builds his own archive of observations, not copied from Ptolemy, but gathered by his own eyes. He finds the same problems that plagued Ptolemaic astronomy, planets wandering oddly, epicycles upon epicycles stacked like crutches on broken legs. The system works, roughly, but it strains. Predictions are never perfect. Mathematics groans under the weight of circles within circles. Copernicus begins to suspect the fault lies not in the math, but in the assumption that the Earth itself is immovable. But he keeps silent. He knows the danger. To question Ptolemy is to question Aristotle, and to question Aristotle is to brush against theology. The Church does not burn men for mathematics, but it does not welcome disruption. Copernicus is cautious by temperament and circumstance. He has security now, a position, a reputation. He will not squander it by shouting at the heavens. Instead, he works quietly, drafting notes, sketching models, running calculations. He toys with the idea that the sun, not the earth, is the center. He tests it with numbers, checks it against observations. And the numbers fit. Not perfectly, nothing ever fits perfectly with the crude instruments of the time, but cleaner, simpler, more elegant. The planets fall into place like beads sliding on a string. Retrograde motion, the great embarrassment of Ptolemy vanishes when the Earth itself moves. This idea is not wholly new. Ancient Greeks like Aristarchus had whispered it centuries before, dismissed as eccentric. Copernicus reads them, remembers them. But now, with careful math and steady observation, he feels he can prove it, or at least demonstrate its superiority. The thought both thrills and terrifies him. Meanwhile, life in Frombork continues. He quarrels with fellow canons over money, repairs roofs, negotiates with townsmen. He spends time with Anna Schilling, a woman who becomes his housekeeper, and, rumours say, his lover. The chapter disapproves, whispering about scandal. Copernicus ignores them, though he grows more cautious. He is no rebel in daily life. His rebellion lies in the stars. He writes small treatises, circulating them among friends. The Commentariolus, his little commentary, outlines the heliocentric idea. It is not published, only shared privately. He is testing the waters, seeing how scholars react. Most dismiss it as speculation. A few nod, intrigued. None imagine it as revolution. Copernicus is relieved. He is not ready to step fully into light. Yet even in silence, his reputation grows. Scholars write to him, asking for advice on calendars, on eclipses, on planetary tables. He corresponds with mathematicians, exchanging numbers and polite flattery. Slowly, his network expands beyond Frombork's quiet walls. The world knows there is a canon on the Baltic who sees further than most. But Copernicus is still a cautious man. He delays, postpones, hesitates. He refines his models, repeats observations, rewrites drafts. He insists it is not yet ready, that errors remain. Perhaps he is perfectionist. Perhaps he is afraid, likely both. For decades he works in shadows, never publishing, never proclaiming, yet always calculating. Outside his tower, Europe shifts. Luther nails theses, reform erupts, the church fractures. Wars stir, empires clash, printing presses spread pamphlets like wildfire. Authority trembles in pulpits and parliaments alike. Copernicus watches but remains silent. His work is not about theology or politics, he tells himself. It is about the heavens. But he knows that the heavens are never free from theology or politics. To move the sun is to move men. And so, the canon of Frombork lives two lives, outwardly respectable, inwardly radical. By day, he signs papers, mends estates, treats patients. By night, he moves the earth in his mind, shifts the sun into its true place, and imagines a cosmos where humanity is no longer the center. It is a quiet revolution, still hidden, still unspoken. But revolutions often begin in silence. By the second decade of the 16th century, Copernicus has already spent years peering at the night sky from Frombork's towers, squinting through simple sighting tubes, charting motions with patience bordering on obsession. The idea has taken root in his mind. Perhaps the universe is not what Aristotle and Ptolemy insisted it was. Perhaps the earth, seemingly so stable beneath his feet, is not the throne of creation, but another wanderer in the heavens. The old system, Ptolemaic and sacred, puts the earth at the center. Planets circle in great loops, each carried on crystalline spheres, their irregularities patched with epicycles, smaller circles upon circles. It works, roughly. But the system groans with complexity, every new observation demanding another epicycle. Retrograde motion, planets appearing to move backward in the sky, requires elaborate tricks. The math feels more like patchwork than truth. Copernicus looks at it and shakes his head. The universe, he thinks, should be simpler. Order should be elegant, not grotesque. So he begins to test the ancient idea of Aristarchus of Samos. What if the earth moves? What if the sun, not the earth, is at the center? He sketches models, runs calculations. If the earth circles the sun, the retrograde motion of planets is no longer mysterious. It is simply geometry. When Earth overtakes Mars, Mars appears to move backward against the stars, just as a slower cart seems to reverse when a faster one passes it on a road. No epicycles needed, no awkward tricks. Motion explains itself. He applies the same to Venus and Mercury. In Ptolemy's system, their strange proximity to the sun requires contrived mechanisms. In his own, they orbit the sun inside Earth's orbit, explaining why they never stray far from the solar glare. Again, simplicity replaces contrivance. He tests the calendar. The church needs reform, because equinoxes drift and Easter slips. If the Earth circles the sun, then the year's length can be measured more precisely. Copernicus's model provides cleaner numbers, better predictions. The practical use of his theory becomes clear. But simplicity is dangerous. To place the sun at the center is to dethrone the earth, and to dethrone the earth is to dethrone man. Scripture seems to say otherwise. Joshua commanding the sun to stand still, Psalms declaring the earth immovable. The church has not yet declared heliocentrism heresy. It has barely noticed it. But Copernicus knows it will not smile upon such audacity, so he works in secret, refining, revising. He writes the Commentoriolus, a short treatise circulated privately among friends outlining 7 principles. The earth moves, the heavens are vast, the sun is at the center. He does not publish it, he tests the waters. A few nod with interest, others dismiss it. No one yet sounds alarms. Copernicus breathes easier, but he still withholds. Decades pass. He observes, calculates, compares. His nights are filled with charts, his days with canon law and estates. He never abandons astronomy, but he never rushes. He is not Bruno, fiery and reckless. He is cautious, deliberate, aware that the wrong word spoken too loudly could brand him mad or worse. Yet others begin to notice. Scholars write letters, urging him to publish. Some admire the elegance of his system, even if they doubt it physically. Mathematics, they say, is useful, even if untrue. Copernicus resists. He claims his work is unfinished, his numbers imperfect. Perhaps that is true, but deeper, fear gnaws. Publishing means exposure. Exposure means risk. The irony is that his model is not perfect. He still clings to circles, as Aristotle demanded, not ellipses. His system still needs epicycles, though fewer. His predictions are not always more accurate than Ptolemy's. But accuracy is not the point. Elegance is. His cosmos breathes with order, not clutter. For him, that is proof enough. Still, he hesitates. He ages. His hair greys, his body stiffens, his reputation grows. Younger astronomers whisper his name, reformers in the church grumble about calendars, begging for better numbers. He has the answer, yet he stalls. It is as if he hopes someone else will dare where he cannot. By the 1530s, he begins drafting his great book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the celestial spheres. He writes carefully, in Latin polished enough for scholars, dense enough to conceal. He piles math upon math, argument upon argument, cloaking audacity in technicality. He knows few will read it fully, but those who do will see the world shift. He shares drafts with trusted allies. Some encourage him, others urge caution. Rumours spread. A cannon in Poland claims the earth moves. Some scoff, others grow intrigued. The idea, once ancient and forgotten, now stirs again. Yet Copernicus delays publishing. Perhaps he fears ridicule, perhaps condemnation, perhaps simply the finality of exposing his life's work. He continues to revise, hiding behind duty, behind perfectionism. The years pass. Europe changes. Luther rails against Rome. Empires clash. Science begins to stir in other fields. Still, Copernicus remains silent. But the theory is there, alive, complete in his mind. The sun at the center, the earth in motion, humanity displaced from cosmic throne. It is not yet public, not yet fire, but it is tinder waiting for spark. And Copernicus knows, once he speaks, nothing will ever be the same. By the early 1540s, Nicolaus Copernicus is an old man. He has spent decades living as a canon, doctor, administrator, reluctant politician, and quiet astronomer. His manuscripts, piled high with calculations and diagrams, have aged with him. The heliocentric model is complete in his mind, polished in his notebooks, whispered among scholars. Yet he still resists. Publishing means stepping into the light, and Copernicus has always preferred shadows. Enter Georg Joachim Rheticus, a young mathematician from Wittenberg, eager, brilliant, restless. Rheticus hears of the canon in far-off Warmia who dares to say the earth moves. He travels across Europe to Frombork, finds Copernicus, and persuades him to share his work. Where others failed, youth and enthusiasm succeed. Rheticus reads the manuscript and is enthralled. He insists the world must see it. At first, Copernicus hesitates. He points to errors, insists it's not ready, mutters about ridicule. Rheticus pushes harder. He convinces Copernicus to allow the printing of a summary, the Narratio Prima. Published in 1540, it presents the heliocentric idea to Europe. Scholars react with curiosity, some with laughter, a few with awe. The spark has been lit. Encouraged, Rheticus arranges for the full manuscript of De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium on the revolutions of the celestial spheres to be sent to Nuremberg for printing. Andreas Osiander, a theologian, oversees the press, and here irony twists the story. Osiander, fearing backlash, adds a preface without Copernicus's consent. It frames the theory as mere hypothesis, a convenient mathematical trick, not a claim about reality. Let no one expect from astronomy certain truth, the preface declares. Its purpose is to provide calculations, not nature. In one stroke, Osiander shields the book from immediate heresy charges, but also blunts its radical edge. Copernicus himself may never know. Legend says the first printed copy of De Revolutionibus is placed in his hands as he lies dying in May 1543, paralyzed by stroke, barely conscious. If true, his eyes see the pages just once before closing forever. A lifetime of caution ends with a whisper of triumph. He dies, and the book begins its own life. The text is dense, technical, filled with diagrams, numbers, proofs. It is not a manifesto, it is a tome. Only trained mathematicians can wade through its Latin seas, yet the idea inside is simple, clear, devastating. The sun sits at the center, the earth spins, the heavens are vast, humanity is displaced. The old cosmos cracks, reactions ripple slowly. Scholars in the first years do not shout heresy. Instead, many treat it as Osiander suggested, a useful hypothesis. Some admire its elegance, others shrug at its impracticality. Astronomers test its predictions, compare tables, debate accuracy. For many, it is a tool, not truth. But seeds sprout slowly. Younger minds begin to wonder, what if it is not hypothesis but reality? What if the Earth truly moves? Tycho Brahe, later in the century, will test and measure, building a compromise system. Johannes Kepler will refine with ellipses. Galileo will stare through a telescope and see moons circling Jupiter, proof that not all revolves around Earth. Each will owe a debt to the cautious canon who dared to move the sun and stop the Earth. Yet controversy simmers. Luther mocks the idea, calling Copernicus a fool who contradicts Scripture. Calvin rails against those who pervert the course of nature. Theologians quote Psalms, "The earth is fixed, it cannot be moved." The Bible, to many, is proof against motion. For now, resistance is rhetorical, not institutional. The Church does not yet ban the book. That will come later, when Galileo forces the issue with telescopes and defiance. But the danger is already present. Meanwhile, De Revolutionibus circulates quietly among scholars, monks, mathematicians. Its diagrams spread, its tables are copied. Some dismiss it as impractical, others begin to suspect it may be truth. The irony deepens. A book written by a cautious canon, printed with a deceptive preface, received at first with polite shrugs, will one day be called the spark of the scientific revolution. Copernicus himself does not live to see any of it. He escapes the ridicule, the praise, the condemnations, the debates. He dies as he lived, quietly, cautiously, almost invisibly. But his book does not die. It moves through Europe like a slow tide, reshaping shores one wave at a time. And so, De Revolutionibus begins its revolution, not with fire or thunder, but with ink, parchment, and the trembling hands of a dying man. When Copernicus dies in 1543, he leaves no disciples gathered at his bedside, no bonfires of heresy, no banners declaring revolution. He dies as he lived, quietly, cautiously, almost anonymously. Yet the book left on his table, De Revolutionibus, will outlive him and outlive the century. It is a slow-burning fuse, lit not with drama, but with calculation, destined to explode long after its author is gone. At first, the impact is modest. Scholars skim it, nod politely, shelve it. The preface by Osiander, insisting that the heliocentric model is only hypothesis, shields it from immediate condemnation. Many accept it as a convenient tool, a mathematical fiction that makes calculations easier. Few proclaim it as truth, but seeds buried in soil do not sprout instantly. They wait, hidden, until conditions ripen. Copernicus's theory is one such seed. The first gardener is Tycho Brahe, the Danish noble who builds an observatory on his island in the late 16th century. Tycho admires Copernicus's elegance but mistrusts his moving Earth. Tycho proposes a compromise. The Sun orbits the Earth, but all other planets orbit the Sun. A strange hybrid, an attempt to save both data and dignity. Yet even in compromise, Tycho keeps Copernicus alive. He measures with unprecedented precision, handing future generations the numbers that will eventually confirm the heliocentric model. Then comes Johannes Kepler, Tycho's assistant, inheriting the treasure trove of data. Kepler dares to break with Aristotle's circles, replacing them with ellipses. With those ellipses, Copernicus's model sharpens into accuracy. Retrograde motion is no longer patched with epicycles, but explained with geometry as simple as it is profound. Kepler calls it harmony of the spheres. History calls it the correction that makes Copernicus unassailable. And then Galileo with his telescope. He points glass at the heavens in 1609 and sees Jupiter's moon circling not the Earth, but Jupiter. Proof undeniable that not all revolves around us. He sees Venus waxing and waning like the moon, proof it orbits the Sun. He sees sunspots on the perfect orb of the Sun, mountains on the supposedly flawless moon. Galileo, unlike Copernicus, does not whisper. He shouts, writes in Italian for common readers, mocks Aristotelians as blind. The Church notices. The Inquisition bristles. Where Copernicus hid, Galileo fights. He will pay the price with trial and house arrest. Yet it is Copernicus's model he defends, the quiet cannon's revolution now roaring in courtrooms. Isaac Newton closes the arc in the 17th century. With his Principia, he explains gravity, proves mathematically that planets orbit because invisible forces bind them. The Sun at the centre is no longer just elegance, it is law. Newton cements what Copernicus guessed, what Kepler refined, what Galileo proclaimed. The heliocentric model becomes reality, not hypothesis. Through these successors, Copernicus becomes father of the scientific revolution, not because he was loud, but because he was right. He dethroned the Earth from the centre, displaced humanity from cosmic throne, humbled theology without ever declaring war on it. His revolution is not fire and martyrdom, it is patience, calculation, quiet courage. The irony is sharp. Copernicus never saw himself as revolutionary. He feared ridicule more than flames. He delayed publishing until the end of his life, reluctant to expose himself. He lived dutifully as canon, doctor, administrator. He was cautious to the point of paralysis, and yet history crowns him with the laurel of upheaval. He became what he never sought, a destroyer of old worlds. His legacy is double-edged. On one side, he is celebrated as liberator of science, the man who moved the sun and stopped the earth, who freed astronomy from epicycles, who began modernity. On the other, he is accused of displacing humanity into insignificance, stripping us of cosmic centrality, making us small. For centuries, poets, philosophers, theologians wrestle with his consequences. Are we special, or just another planet circling an ordinary star? The anxiety lingers even now. His reputation grows after death. By the 17th century, his name is invoked in debates across Europe. By the Enlightenment, he is a symbol of reason triumphing over dogma. By the 19th, statues rise in Poland. Scholars call him national hero. Europe claims him as pioneer. By the 20th, his face appears on banknotes, his name on craters of the moon, even on spacecraft. The quiet canon becomes an icon, whether he wanted it or not. But the true legacy is not statues or craters. It is the method he embodied, questioning authority, trusting observation, daring to imagine a simpler order beneath complexity. He did not invent doubt, but he dignified it. He showed that even a canon bound by vows and duties could peer at the sky and suspect that everything written was wrong. And so, Copernicus remains paradox, a cautious man whose caution delayed his revolution, yet whose revolution came anyway, a churchman who destabilized theology without abandoning it, a scholar who feared ridicule, yet redefined reality. He lived and died quietly, yet he shook the cosmos. The earth still spins, the sun still blazes at the center, humanity still grapples with its displacement. Every telescope, every probe, every theory that expands the universe begins, in some way, with Copernicus staring out of a Frombork tower, daring to whisper that maybe we are not the center after all. That whisper became a roar, and the roar still echoes. Our next story will follow the life of Ludwig van Beethoven, so settle in, get comfortable, and enjoy listening along. He is born in a town of resonant echoes and practical trades, where the Rhine rolls past stone houses and the court orchestra of the Elector rehearses in rooms barely warmer than the winter air. Bonn in 1770 is not Vienna. There is no imperial swagger in its streets, no grand palaces to swallow light. But music is a citizen here nonetheless. And in a narrow house at Bonngasse 20, where the floorboards creak and wine breathes in the cupboard, a child arrives who will make more of sound than anyone expects sound can hold. The records say he is baptized on December 17th, and custom suggests he is born the day before. His name is Ludwig, like his grandfather, a Flemish import who rose to Kapellmeister and kept dignity buttoned to his coat, even as money and respect slipped, as they always do, more quickly than they arrive. The grandfather's portrait hangs in the house and watches the family's decline with oil-painted composure. The father, Johann, a tenor in the court chapel, sees the same name on his son and imagines a ladder to the future. He drinks. He dreams. And on the nights when dream and drink fuse, he bangs on the child's door and orders practice by candlelight, a metronome replaced by a fist on the table. The mother, Maria Magdalena, wraps the boy's bruised mornings in warm cloth and quieter words. She does not push. She tends. In Beethoven's later memory, which holds very little tenderness, her figure glows like a pocket of spared light. Between the father's force and the mother's gentleness, the child learns what music will always be for him: demand and refuge, iron discipline, and secret mercy. He is not a miracle child. He is not the smiling 8-year-old prodigy who leaps from keyboard to applause without stumbling. The myth, which his father tries to conjure like a trick under candlelight, never fits. Lessons come hard and daily on harpsichord, violin, organ, with local teachers who teach what they know and a father who teaches what he fears, that a boy without brilliance will become a man without bread. There are early performances, one in 1778 at Cologne, the father falsifying the boy's age to make him seem more wonder than work. And there is applause of the polite sort that dissolves as soon as it is made. But Bonn itself begins the more useful education. The court orchestra plays, the Elector's chapel sings, processions thread along narrow streets with brass and banners. The child hears hymns and horn calls, comic opera tunes whistled by soldiers outside taverns, the serious scaffolding of counterpoint from the organ loft, and something unnamed that glows behind all of it, the sense that sound is not just ornament for days, but a shape in which days can be understood. Teachers appear as if the town itself is handing him stepping stones. Gilles van den Eden offers early violin and keyboard instruction. Franz Rovantini drills. And finally, a door opens onto the teacher who matters, Christian Gottlob Neef, the new court organist, whose manner is less belligerent than Johann's and whose library is larger than Bond streets. Neef gives him a key to the kingdom of Bach, the well-tempered clavier, and with it a grammar of the possible. It is not enough to play what lies under the fingers, one must understand what lies behind the notes, the structure on which the song hangs like a coat. Underneath, the boy becomes a musician rather than a household project. He copies fugues until ink bleeds into his fingernails. He learns that counterpoint is not prison, but principle, that rules are not shackles if you intend to break them with precision later. Neef writes a brief notice in Kramer's Magazin der Musik in 1783, calling him a boy of 11 years and of most promising talent, adding, carefully, daringly, that he would surely become a second Mozart if he continues as he has begun. The comparison will haunt him like a shadow thrown by someone else's lamp. Publication arrives early. The Kurfürst sonatas and the Dressler variations appear with engraving that gives the family pride and creditors pause. Money is always thin. Siblings die. Sickness bides its time. His father's drinking deepens from habit to hunger. In such houses, children become scaffolding. Ludwig becomes the oldest beam. He plays organ service, substitutes in the court chapel, and joins the viola desk in the elector's orchestra. The viola is not the hero's instrument. It is middle voice, throat of the harmony, an education in listening beneath melody. Years later, when he builds symphonies like cathedrals, the viola's vantage will still inform his plans. The way inner parts carry weight, the way motion is transmitted through the middle rather than imposed from above. He finds a second family at the Brunings' house, a place of bread without stale fear. Helene von Breuning and her children, especially Eleanor, offer books, conversation, and a gentler air. There, he reads Schiller and Shakespeare by lamplight, stumbles through fragments of the Sturm und Drang, hears talk of liberty and feeling rather than survival and wine. The idealism that will later fling him against kings is watered here, one poem at a time. Bonn's court grows enlightened under Elector Maximilian Franz, who installs reforms and tastes Italian opera with appetite. Lorenzo da Ponte's libretti drift through the court. Mozart's music arrives like rumour and weather. It is said, by programme notes and wishful imaginations, that in 1787 the young Beethoven travels to Vienna and plays before Mozart, who, after hearing him improvise, says, "Keep your eyes on him. He will make a noise in the world." The story is delicious and unprovable. What is provable is the travel, the interruption, the return. A journey to Vienna begun, a mother's sickness recalled, a boy raced back to Bonn before anything can take root. That spring, his mother's tuberculosis advances with the cruelty of ordinary tragedy. In July 1787, she dies. The house, always precarious, collapses inward. His father sinks deeper into the bottle. The court docks Johann's pay and orders half sent directly to Ludwig for the support of his younger brothers, Caspar, Karl, and Johann. He is 16 and a parent. The boy who might have continued lessons in Vienna becomes the man who pays Bonn's butcher. He writes a letter to a friend calling his mother so good, so gentle, and the phrase is like an exposed nerve, a tenderness rarely seen again, because tenderness unarmoured does not survive. The next years are work without romance, chapel services, theatre orchestra, lessons to dull children of dull patrons, every coin bent into bread. But even inside necessity, he writes, piano trios, a cantata for the Emperor Joseph II's death, never performed but ambitious enough to embarrass, Bonn's modest expectations. Pieces that smell faintly of Vienna even while they are copied in Bonn. He improvises famously. At social evenings he sits at the keyboard and pulls forms out of air, shocking polite company with storms and stillnesses no one thought a local boy could command. A figure arrives whose presence is both blessing and dare. Joseph Haydn passes through Bonn in 1790 and again in 1792, the old master who has already built symphonies like cathedrals and string quartets like architecture. Beethoven meets him. Whether sparks or politeness pass between them is left to biographers to choreograph. What is certain is the elector's decision and the young man's acceptance. He will go to Vienna to study with Haydn. He will leave the Rhine for the Danube, Bonn's chapel for the city that considers itself the capital of music. He arranges for the care of his brothers, extracts what pay the chapter will release, and gathers manuscripts into a portfolio that looks more like a life raft than luggage. In the last months before departure, he walks the riverbanks at dusk when the sky is a score and birds sing counterpoint without permission. Bonn has given him duty, discipline, and the first outlines of his voice. Vienna will demand everything else. He is not a prodigy now, he is a craftsman with fury and reserve. The grandfather's portrait will remain in the house, the father's shadow will remain in his temper. The mother's warmth will remain in the memory he cannot afford to revisit often. He carries with him the viola's patience, the organ's gravity, the Breuning's books, Neef's Basch, the rumour of Mozart, the reality of Haydn, the text of Schiller's An die Freude planted like a seed he cannot yet name. He leaves Bonn in November 1792, and revolution troubles France. The elector will soon flee, Bonn's orchestra will dissolve. He does not know this. He only knows that something inside him is too large for the rooms he has been given. The road to Vienna is a road away from a life that would have been serviceable and small. In his pocket, letters of introduction, Count Waldstein's among them, promise patrons. In his head, he hears music no keyboard, yet has the strength to contain. The carriage rattles, the Rhine recedes, and the boy from Bonn-Gasse, 20, rides toward the city where he will fight, compose, break, and begin again. If the story were simple, this would be triumphal. But nothing in him is simple. He is dutiful and disobedient, tender and harsh, grateful and resentful. He will arrive in Vienna not to kneel, but to take the measure of masters and then to exceed them, if need be by force. Behind him, a house where practice sounded like punishment. Ahead, a city where practice will sound like war. For now, though, the wheels turn, the winter deepens, and a young man with a face not yet famous stares out at fields and thinks of themes he cannot yet write. Vienna in the 1790s is not just a city, it is a stage. Every salon is a theatre, every drawing room an arena. Here aristocrats compete in patronage, composers in innovation, and pianists in the art of turning ivory keys into weapons of charm. Into this noise arrives a young man from Bonn, hair already unruly, temper barely disguised, manners rougher than polished, carrying letters of introduction and music that refuses to sit politely. He is supposed to study under Joseph Haydn, the old master returning from London, with fame trailing behind him like perfume. Haydn, genial and wise, agrees to teach counterpoint. Beethoven sits before him with exercises, fugues, chorales. He writes them with precision, then listens to Haydn's corrections with a face that barely hides impatience. He respects Haydn, yes, but he suspects the old man's fame weighs heavier than his attention to students. Later, Beethoven will claim he learned little from Haydn, that he sought other teachers, Schoenberg, Albrecht Spergi, for stricter discipline in counterpoint. The truth is somewhere in between. Haydn gave him legitimacy, others gave him grammar. Beethoven gave himself fury. Vienna notices him quickly. The salons of nobles, Lichnowsky, Lobkowitz, the Brunswicks, open their doors. Count Waldstein, his Bonn patron, has already whispered, "Through unceasing diligence you shall receive Mozart's spirit from Haydn's hands." Expectations hang like chandeliers, but Beethoven does not arrive as a docile heir. He storms drawing rooms with improvisations that leave listeners gasping. He sits at the keyboard, accepts a theme tossed at him by some smug aristocrat, and builds from it cathedrals of sound, thundering basses, trembling trills, unexpected silences. Then he shatters it into fragments and rebuilds until the theme itself is unrecognizable, transformed into something larger, louder, alive. He earns a reputation not just as pianist, but as duelist. Vienna adores contests, one composer against another, one pianist against another. Beethoven faces Daniel Steibelt, fashionable, polished, known for delicate touch. Steibelt plays, bows, and smirks. Beethoven replies by picking up Steibelt's own theme, twisting it, humiliating it, exploding it into variations so overwhelming that Steibelt storms out and never returns to Vienna. The city laughs. Beethoven gains not just admiration, but fear. To challenge him is to risk public annihilation. But salons are not only battlefields, they are also marketplaces. Beethoven charms patrons, sometimes with music, rarely with manners. His temper is quick, his speech blunt, his demands audacious. Yet nobles tolerate it because his improvisations burn brighter than etiquette. Prince Lichnowsky offers him lodging, a stipend, and Beethoven bites the hand even as he accepts it, because gratitude is not in his blood. He accepts support from Lobkowitz, Razumovsky, the Brunswicks, yet he never bows fully. His independence becomes part of his legend. Compositions begin to pour. Early piano sonatas show his style, echoes of Haydn and Mozart, yes, but already straining against boundaries. He fills pages with sudden storms, abrupt silences, dynamic shocks. He writes as if instruments are barely sufficient for what he imagines. His Opus 1 piano trios, performed in 1795, make Vienna sit straighter. This is no polite background music. This is Beethoven demanding attention. He performs constantly, sometimes to rapt audiences, sometimes to bored aristocrats whispering during sonatas. He improvises at academies, dazzles at concerts, shatters expectations. Yet even in these triumphs, his temper flickers. If listeners chatter, he slams keys harder. If patrons condescend, he snaps. If rivals boast, he challenges them on the spot. Vienna forgives him because genius excuses insolence. For now, money remains a constant struggle. Patronage helps, commissions trickle, concerts bring fees, but debts hover. Beethoven is careless with coins, generous to friends, indifferent to accounts. He lives in lodgings that grow cluttered with manuscripts, unwashed clothes, half-empty wine bottles. Servants quit after weeks, complaining of chaos. He shrugs. Order is for measures, not for rooms. In Vienna's taverns, rumours swirl. Some call him the new Mozart. Others mutter about arrogance, about rustic manners, about a face too plain for society. Yet when he sits at the piano, all chatter dissolves. Even critics admit, here is something new. Not elegance, not charm, but force. Friendships and romances entangle him. He grows close to the Brunswick sisters, especially Josephine, whom later biographers will link to letters of desperate affection. He confesses love in words heavy with longing. Those circumstances, her rank, his status, family opposition, make marriage impossible. This pattern will repeat. Beethoven falling, burning, thwarted, channeling heartbreak into music. For now, though, he is young, admired, and still believes time is abundant. Vienna itself becomes his canvas. He hears folk tunes in taverns, military marches in streets, Italian arias in theatres, church masses in chapels. He absorbs all and transforms it. He sketches constantly, ideas scrawled on scraps, in margins, in books. His notebooks fill with fragments, motifs that will someday roar as symphonies. He walks the city, muttering, gesturing, humming. Passers-by stare, whisper, laugh. He ignores them. Music pounds too loud inside to leave room for shame. In 1796, he tours Prague, Dresden, Berlin. Everywhere he dazzles, everywhere he quarrels, everywhere he leaves both admirers and enemies. His improvisations become legend. The young man who can make a keyboard sound like orchestra, thunder, storm. His fame grows beyond Vienna, though Vienna remains his battlefield and his home. By the end of the decade, Beethoven is no longer merely promising. He is established, pianist without rival, composer without restraint. He publishes sonatas that shock, quartets that stretch, concertos that challenge soloists and orchestras alike. Vienna expects brilliance from him now, not surprise. But Beethoven never delivers what is expected. For beneath triumph lurks something darker. In quiet moments he notices sounds slipping away, tones muffled, conversations harder to follow. At first he blames distractions, fatigue, illness. But inside, a cold fear begins. The one thing he needs most, the one sense on which everything depends, is faltering. He says nothing yet. He plays louder, listens harder, hides the suspicion. But the first shadows of silence have already begun to creep. By the turn of the century, Vienna knows Beethoven's name, not just as a pianist who humiliates rivals in salons, not just as a composer of striking trios and sonatas, but as a figure impossible to ignore. He is young still, his hair wild, his temper legendary, his music unmistakable. While Haydn bows into twilight and Mozart has long since been lowered into a pauper's grave, Beethoven stands at the center of Vienna's stage. Audiences flock not just to hear him play, but to see him wrestle with the keyboard, sweat flying, fingers hammering as if he is fighting sound itself. The year 1800 brings the First Symphony, performed at the Burgtheater. It begins politely enough. Listeners hear Haydn, hear Mozart. But then Beethoven startles them. Accents fall where none are expected. Harmonies strain against convention. The music turns abrupt, forceful, unpredictable. It is a symphony with manners, yes, but manners that grind their teeth. Critics murmur. Some call it bold, others call it noisy. But everyone knows. This is not imitation. This is a new voice, and Vienna must reckon with it. Commissions arrive. Patrons continue to support him. Lichnowsky, Lobkowitz, Razumovsky. He publishes piano sonatas that expand the instrument beyond parlors. The Pathétique Sonata in C minor shocks with its drama, its grave opening, its sudden storms. The Moonlight Sonata, so nicknamed by poets, not Beethoven, becomes legend, a dreamlike first movement that drips melancholy, followed by a finale of thunder. Audiences swoon, pianists struggle, critics argue. Beethoven shrugs. He never writes to please. He writes because he cannot stop. But in these same years, the whisper becomes raw. His hearing is failing. At first, it is difficulty catching voices in crowded rooms, trouble hearing soft notes. He strains to follow conversations, pretends to understand, laughs at jokes he cannot hear. He tells no one. Pride seals his lips. For a pianist, for a composer, deafness is execution. He refuses to admit the sentence. By 1802, the decline accelerates. In despair, he retreats to Heiligenstadt, a village outside Vienna, under doctor's advice to rest. There, he writes a letter, never sent, now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. In it, he pours his anguish. Ah! How could I possibly admit an infirmity in the one sense which ought to be more perfect in me than in others? He confesses thoughts of suicide, the temptation to end what he cannot endure. And yet he writes, "It was only my art that held me back." If he cannot live for hearing, he will live for music. The letter is sealed, hidden, unsent. Beethoven returns to Vienna outwardly unchanged, inwardly scarred. He hides his deafness as best he can, shouting when others whisper, retreating when conversation becomes impossible. His manners, always rough, grow rougher. He offends patrons, quarrels with friends, lashes out at servants. Some blame arrogance, others eccentricity. Few suspect the truth. He is fighting the silence that will not stop approaching. But in music, he explodes. The Second Symphony bursts with vitality, humor, brilliance, written even as despair clutched him. It is as if he is daring silence. You may take my ears, but you cannot take my sound. Critics call it strange, daring, even bizarre. He smiles grimly. Around him, Vienna buzzes. Napoleon Bonaparte strides across Europe, crowned emperor, adored by some, despised by others. Beethoven admires him at first, sees in him a man who rose by merit, not birth, who embodies liberty, equality, fraternity. He dedicates a new symphony, his third, to Napoleon, inscribing his name proudly on the manuscript. Then, news arrives that Napoleon has crowned himself emperor. Beethoven explodes, tearing the title page, scratching out Napoleon's name until the paper rips. He renames it Eroica, the Heroic Symphony. The Eroica is unlike anything Vienna has heard. It is vast, twice the length of polite symphonies, filled with dissonance, turbulence, audacity. The funeral march in the second movement is heavy enough to bury empires. Audiences are stunned, critics divided. Some call it chaos, others genius. A friend writes that it is a miracle. Beethoven simply calls it truth. He has written not entertainment, but destiny. His fame spreads beyond Vienna. Leipzig, Prague, Berlin, London. They publish his works, perform them, argue about them. He becomes a figure of controversy and reverence, admired for genius, condemned for roughness. He never bows. When nobles chatter during performances, he slams keys harder, glares until silence falls. When princes speak to him as if he is servant, he snaps. There are and will be thousands of princes. There is only one Beethoven. Patrons tolerate him because they must. His improvisations still dazzle, though he performs less as deafness worsens. His compositions sell, though they bewilder. His quartets begin to stretch ears, his sonatas to terrify pianists. Vienna does not always understand, but it cannot look away. Yet daily life is chaos. His lodgings shift constantly, cluttered with scores, wine bottles, laundry. Servants quit, calling him impossible. He forgets to pay rent, quarrels with landlords, insults benefactors, reconciles only to quarrel again. Friends describe him as both warm and cruel, generous and selfish, brilliant and impossible. He is contradiction embodied, and music is the only place where contradictions fuse into coherence. Deafness continues. By 1806, he confesses to a few trusted friends. They console, but cannot understand. How can a man who writes such sound live without hearing? He answers by writing more. The Fourth Symphony, light and graceful, astonishes with wit. The Fifth, with its four-note fate motif, becomes immortal. Thus fate knocks at the door, Beethoven supposedly says. Whether he said it or not, the symphony declares it. Fate has knocked already. He cannot escape it. But he can answer, and his answer is sound. By the end of the first decade of the 19th century, Beethoven has done something no composer before him dared so openly. He has turned music into autobiography, into a battle between fate and defiance. His works are no longer ornaments for noble salons. They are storms unleashed in concert halls, demanding not to be overheard, but to be endured. Vienna begins to realize that listening to Beethoven is less about pleasure than about survival. In 1808, he unveils a monumental concert, the kind of marathon only he would dare imagine. On December 22nd, in the Theater an der Wien, he presents the Fifth Symphony, the Sixth Symphony, the Fourth Piano Concerto, the Choral Fantasy, and more, all in one freezing evening. Audiences shiver, orchestras stumble, but history is made. The Fifth begins with four notes that will never be forgotten. Da, 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 dum. They fall like a hammer, like fate itself pounding at the door. The symphony surges with struggle, triumph, inevitability. For Beethoven, already living half in silence, it is a declaration. Even fate can be fought, and music is the weapon. Audiences are stunned, critics bewildered, but the motif echoes through history, turning into shorthand for resistance itself. Yet the same evening brings contrast. The Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral, opens not with thunder, but with sunlight. Beethoven paints nature in sound, streams babbling in woodwinds, birds chirping in flutes, peasants dancing in rustic rhythms. A storm breaks, lightning in strings, thunder in timpani, then clears into a hymn of thanksgiving. It is as if Beethoven says, I can summon fate with 4 notes, but I can also summon fields, rivers, storms, and peace. He expands what symphonies can hold, now not just struggle, but the whole of existence. The concert itself is chaos. The hall is cold, rehearsals inadequate, musicians underprepared. Beethoven conducts with passion bordering on fury, beating time so violently he nearly falls off the podium. The performance is rough, but the ideas blaze through. Critics grumble about execution, but history remembers conception. Between these symphonies, Beethoven continues to expand his arsenal. His Emperor Concerto, piano concerto number 5 in E-flat major, earns its nickname from sheer grandeur. It opens with a soloist's proclamation as if announcing sovereignty. Beethoven himself, too deaf to perform, entrusts it to others. Audiences hear not a concerto of polite conversation between soloist and orchestra, but of soloist as hero, orchestra as battlefield, themes clashing and reconciling with grandeur. It becomes emblem of his middle period, bold, monumental, unapologetic. But triumph outside masks, torment inside. His deafness deepens. By 1810, he hears little in conversation. Ear trumpets appear, awkward tubes pressed to his head. He begins using conversation books, where friends write questions and he scribbles answers. He pretends sometimes, nodding when he cannot hear, laughing at jokes he missed. His pride bristles. He refuses pity. He grows isolated, temper sharper. Love continues to torment him. In July 1812, in the Bohemian spa town of Teplitz, he writes a passionate letter to his immortal beloved, never sent, never delivered. The identity of the beloved remains debated. Josephine von Brunswick, Anthony Brentano, others. Whoever she was, Beethoven pours longing into the letter, ever thine, ever mine, ever ours. Yet he cannot have her. Class, circumstance, his own nature, everything blocks fulfillment. Love for him is always music, intense, unconsummated, eternal only on paper. He meets Goethe there as well, the titan of German literature. Their walk together becomes legend, Beethoven striding boldly through crowds, ignoring nobles, Goethe bowing politely. Goethe later writes of Beethoven's untamed personality, his refusal to yield. Beethoven, for his part, admires Goethe's art, but scorns his deference to aristocrats. 2 giants, one bending, one breaking. Financially, he survives through a mix of genius and stubbornness. Patrons form a unique arrangement in 1809. Archduke Rudolf, Prince Lobkowitz, and Prince Kinsky promise him a pension to keep him in Vienna, fearing he might leave for Kassel. It is an unprecedented contract, nobles paying not for specific works, but simply to keep a composer present. Beethoven becomes one of the first truly independent composers, free from church or court employment. He calls the tune now, even if money remains irregular when patrons falter. His living conditions remain chaotic. He changes lodgings constantly, manuscripts piling around him, pianos damaged by furious pounding. Landlords complain, neighbours petition about noise. Beethoven shrugs. Order is for form, not life. He composes in fragments, jotting motifs on scraps, humming, muttering, pacing. Visitors describe him wild-haired, dishevelled, clothes unkempt. Yet from this chaos, architecture emerges. Symphonies built with iron logic, quartets woven with precision, concertos blazing with clarity. By 1814, Napoleon is defeated, Vienna hosts the Congress of Vienna, diplomats swarm the city, politics and music intertwine. Beethoven is at the centre. His Wellington's Victory, a bombastic battle piece with cannons and patriotic flair, pleases crowds and earns money, though he privately considers it trivial. His true works, the 7th and 8th symphonies, premiere in this period. Richard Wagner later calls the 7th the apotheosis of the dance, with rhythms so relentless audiences leap from seats. The 8th is shorter, lighter, playful, almost mocking expectations. Beethoven, even in grandeur, retains humour. But behind applause lies loneliness. Deafness now isolates him almost fully. He avoids gatherings, communicates by notebooks, mistrusts friends. He grows suspicious, irritable, convinced others plot against him. His family burdens him further. Disputes with his brothers, especially over custody of his nephew Karl, consume years. He seeks control over Karl's life, convinced he can raise him, but the relationship will later collapse into tragedy. Yet in music, he is inexhaustible. His middle period closes with works that define an era. 9 symphonies by 1815, piano concertos, quartets, sonatas that stretch instruments beyond known limits. He is no longer merely Vienna's eccentric genius. He is Europe's central composer, admired, debated, feared. His works echo in Paris, London, Berlin. Students seek him, rivals envy him, audiences both worship and endure him. And still, the silence deepens. He cannot hear the ovations, the laughter, the chatter. He stands amid applause and perceives only vibrations. He bows awkwardly, relying on cues from musicians. He lives inside a paradox. The loudest music of his age flows from a man already sealed in quiet. By the late 1810s, Beethoven is a man at war with everything: his health, his family, his friends, his city, and often himself. Deafness is nearly total. Conversation books replace speech, visitors scribbling questions while he scrawls answers. His hearing loss has made him suspicious, irritable, prone to bursts of rage. Yet within this turmoil, the music of his final years begins to rise. Music unlike anything the world has heard, born not in salons or theatres, but in the solitude of his silence. The first and most bitter battlefield is family. His brother Caspar Karl dies in 1815, leaving behind a son, Karl, and a widow. Beethoven, convinced he alone can shape the boy's future, enters into a vicious custody battle. He calls the widow immoral and unworthy, fights in courts for guardianship, drags his nephew into years of legal disputes. He wins, but the victory poisons everything. Young Karl grows resentful under Beethoven's suffocating authority, his attempts to mould him into greatness collapsing into quarrels and despair. In 1826, Karl attempts suicide. The blow devastates Beethoven, who blames fate, circumstance, everyone but himself. His health, never robust, worsens. He suffers fevers, abdominal pain, jaundice. He writes complaints in letters, endures treatments with leeches and purges, clutches at remedies that never cure. His body breaks even as his mind burns brighter. Friends describe him as gaunt, hair-wild, eyes burning. He frightens landlords, bullies servants, alienates allies, yet those who remain cannot deny the magnitude of his genius. Financially, he struggles despite fame. His pension from patrons wavers, inflation eats at income, lawsuits drain funds. He writes letters begging for payments, quarrels with publishers, demands high fees for manuscripts. Yet even in hardship, he refuses compromise. When asked to simplify, he snarls, "Art is not for comfort, but for truth." And so the late works begin. The Hammerklavier Sonata, colossal, unplayable for decades, stretching the piano to breaking. The Missa Solemnis, a mass not for liturgy, but for eternity, filled with terror, glory, vastness. Audiences and musicians alike are bewildered. Some call him mad, others whisper he has surpassed humanity. Then comes the Ninth Symphony. Years in planning, decades in imagining, it becomes reality in 1824. Its first three movements are vast enough to overwhelm. The opening allegro blazing, the scherzo pounding with relentless rhythm, the adagio stretching into infinite peace. But the finale breaks all precedent. For the first time in symphonic history, voices enter. Baritone soloists, choir, an entire ode to joy by Schiller set to music that declares unity, brotherhood, triumph. It is not just symphony, it is proclamation. The premiere at the Count Nator Theatre is chaos. Beethoven, deaf, stands conducting, flailing, unaware of what the orchestra plays. Musicians ignore his beat, following the real conductor. When the final chorus roars, the hall erupts in ovation. Beethoven, facing the orchestra, hears nothing. A singer gently turns him toward the audience. He sees applause, cheers, hands waving. He bows, tears in eyes. For a moment, silence does not win. The Ninth stuns Europe. Some call it divine, others incomprehensible. Critics debate its audacity, musicians fear its demands. But history records it as the summit of symphonic art, the moment music declares itself larger than nations, larger than faith, larger even than sound. After the triumph, decline accelerates. His health collapses further. He lives with stomach pains, fevers, exhaustion. His letters grow desperate, alternating between bursts of inspiration and resignation. He continues to compose, late-string quartets that puzzle audiences, their strange forms, sudden silences, fugues that sound like eternity. Musicians decades later will call them scripture. For contemporaries, they are alien, too vast, too private. In 1826, after Karl's suicide attempt, Beethoven collapses with illness. He spends his final months bedridden, surrounded by drafts, manuscripts, conversation books. Visitors note his moods swing between rage and kindness, despair and acceptance. Doctors prescribe purges, punctures, remedies that only weaken him further. On March 26, 1827, during a thunderstorm, Beethoven dies. Witnesses say lightning cracks outside as he raises a fist, defiant to the end. He is 56, body ruined, mind immortal. His funeral days later draws crowds estimated at 20,000. Schubert, who will die the following year, is among the pallbearers. The streets of Vienna flood with mourners, musicians, citizens, all paying tribute to the man who had terrified, baffled, and transformed them. Beethoven's final years are tragedy and triumph woven together. He alienated family, quarreled with patrons, suffered illness, lived in poverty. Yet he gave the world works that redefined art, the Ninth Symphony, the late quartets, the Missa Solemnis. His silence became his source. Where others would have withered, he wrestled the void into sound. And so the late Beethoven stands in history not as broken, but as transcendent. Deaf, ill, furious, he created music that still shakes concert halls centuries later. His life's contradictions, anger and tenderness, chaos and structure, despair and joy, are fused forever in notes that continue to speak even when their creator could not hear them. The winter of 1826 into 1827 is cruel to Beethoven. His health, already fragile, collapses under the weight of infections and treatments that do more harm than good. Doctors prescribe bleeding, blisters, enemas, and wine reduced to trickle. Nothing helps. His body wastes away while his mind, still burning with ideas, scrawls fragments of quartets and fugues that his hand cannot always finish. Visitors describe a man gaunt, his wild hair now white, his eyes still blazing like storm clouds lit from within. He lives in an apartment in the Schwarzspanjer house, a monastery converted into housing, his last of many lodgings. Conversation books pile at his bedside, filled with questions from visitors and answers in his shaky hand. He jokes bitterly, rails at incompetent doctors, blesses friends with sudden tenderness. He asks for wine and quips when it arrives. Pity, pity, it was too late. Even in agony, his humour cuts. On March 26, 1827, a thunderstorm rages over Vienna. Witnesses say lightning flashes as Beethoven raises a clenched fist, as if defying heaven itself one final time. Moments later, he exhales, his face serene. He is 56. Silence has finally claimed the man who spent his life fighting it. News spreads quickly. Vienna, city of music, city of gossip, city of memory, responds with astonishment. Crowds gather outside his residence, mourning not just a composer, but a figure who seemed larger than ordinary mortality. Plans for the funeral swell. 3 days later, March 29th, Vienna witnesses one of the largest funerals the city has ever seen. An estimated 20,000 people line the streets. Schools close, businesses pause, traffic halts. Soldiers in uniforms keep order, but even they seem subdued. The procession winds from the Schwarzspanjer house to the Church of the Holy Trinity in Alserstrasse, then to the Währing cemetery. Musicians walk in solemn lines. Franz Schubert, only 30, carries a torch. He himself will die within a year, buried nearby. Choir boys sing hymns. Orchestras play marches. The coffin is draped in black, carried by students and friends. Nobles and commoners alike follow, side by side, united for once in grief. At the graveside, poet Franz Grillparzer delivers the oration. His words strike like hammer blows. He was an artist, but who can stand beside him? Not the crown, not the sword, not the scepter. He was the man who united mankind through art. The crowd listens in silence, then bursts into applause. At a funeral, for a dead man. It is as if Vienna recognizes that Beethoven has already crossed from life into myth. The burial is simple, but the memory is monumental. Newspapers print tributes across Europe. Paris, London, Berlin, all mourn the loss of a man they claim as their own. Obituaries call him Titan, genius, prophet. Myths sprout overnight. The boy who met Mozart, the man who defied emperors, the composer who shook fists at fate. His real life, chaotic rooms, bitter quarrels, endless debts, begins to dissolve under legend's polish. But the music remains, heavier than myth. Performances of his symphonies multiply. The ninth spreads across Europe, bewildering some, enthralling others. Young composers study his scores with awe and despair. How to follow him, how to write after him. Schubert, standing at his grave, is said to murmur, "Who shall stand beside him?" Within months Schubert is gone too, as if even fate knew Vienna could not carry both. Beethoven's immediate legacy is contradiction. Some see him as the last of the classicists, heir of Haydn and Mozart. Others see him as the first romantic, prophet of storm and emotion. He is both, and neither. His early works carry classical grace, his middle blaze with heroic force, his late whisper secrets of eternity. Composers spend the 19th century struggling with him, either imitating, rebelling, or collapsing under the weight of his shadow. Audiences too shift. For years, his late quartets are dismissed as incomprehensible Chinese puzzles. Later generations declare them sacred. The Missa Solemnis, ignored at its premiere, becomes revered as monument. The ninth grows into anthem, not just of art, but of humanity. Its ode to joy echoes in revolutions, in protests, in celebrations, centuries after Beethoven's fist closed in death. Vienna keeps his memory alive, but the world claims him. Statues rise in Bonn, his birthplace. Festivals are named after him. Scholars pore over manuscripts, biographies swell into shelves. Every fragment of his life is studied, debated, mythologized. Was the immortal, beloved Josephine von Brunswick, Anthony Brentano, someone else? The mystery feeds the legend, as if Beethoven himself orchestrated it to keep future generations guessing. And always the image persists. The man of chaos, scribbling on scraps, pounding pianos into wreckage, storming at servants, yet producing symphonies that outlast empires. The contrast becomes part of his legacy. He is proof that genius is not tidy, that greatness is not polite. He is a reminder that art worth remembering is forged not in peace, but in conflict. By the end of the 19th century, Beethoven is canonized. Wagner, Brahms, Mahler, each bows, fights, or grapples with him. Philosophers quote him, politicians invoke him, revolutions borrow his music. He is not just composer, but symbol of resistance, of humanity, of the capacity of one man to wrestle silence and win. And in the centuries that follow, the myth grows louder. The Ninth is played at the fall of the Berlin Wall, at Olympic ceremonies, at moments when humanity tries to believe in itself. His portrait stares from posters, his name from concert halls. The wild-haired genius, deaf yet defiant, lives longer than any empire that once paid him. Beethoven's death closed his life, but it opened his immortality. The man who once begged patrons for coins now commands orchestras across continents. The composer who once terrified audiences now unites them in applause. The figure who once scribbled despair in Heiligenstadt is now remembered as the voice of hope. Yet perhaps his truest legacy is more intimate. For every listener, in every hall, in every age, his music whispers or thunders that struggle is not the end. That silence is not defeat. That even when fate pounds at the door, the answer can still be joy. And so Beethoven remains, 2 centuries later, not a memory, not a statue, not even a myth, but a presence. The boy from Bonn who became Vienna's storm, the deaf man who gave the world sound, the mortal who wrote immortality in notes. His grave is in Vienna, but his voice is everywhere.